Listen to this song. We're gonna get rocked. And the challenge is, we'll be rocked by what? We'll be excited. And then we're being told that we will rock you. Let's talk about food. Let's talk about meat. First slide. When I buy a piece of meat, whether it's at a grocery store or at a restaurant that I'm going to consume into my body, I want to know if that labeling, if that identification is true, fair, and accurate. Here's the issue. We all have heard about the European scandal of beef labeled products being contaminated with horse meat. That's a real thing. It just happened. Let's look at this slide. On the left-hand side, you'll see a grocery store clerk decoratively arranging the products for sale. The issue is that meat accurately labeled by that organization, that clerk, or are there evil intents to make additional profits or inflated profits by mislabeling? Look at the hamburger on the right. What is hamburger? It is flesh or tissue which has been scraped off of other cuts and put into a mix of all the products. That is probably the most liable for this type of food fraud of any kind of our purchases that we normally make. As Americans, do we have a right, a legal right, for that vendor to sell us what we want, what's identified, and not be defrauded? Next slide. Well, like most Americans, I love beef. I love the taste of it. I like it when it's cooked with spices in various formats, whether it's a hamburger at a fast food joint, in a taco, or a piece of beef in a steak format. Let's look at that graphic on the left of our steer and all the cuts that we like to talk about. And then look at the animal on the right. That is equine. That is a horse. That's not beef. My sister used to ride horses. She was in a riding academy. She rode trick horses for Walt Disney. I love horses. We used to own them. We used to feed them. We used to take them to the veterinarian. Chapman University made a study recently of mislabeled meat products. They purchased it from 48 samples. They analyzed it using DNA testing. That's not visual. That's a chemical test using specific primers and probes. I've been working in that area for 15 years. And they found 10 to be mislabeled. In other words, 10 were frauds, labeled as beef, and they included other species, potentially all horse meat. It's illegal to sell horse meat in the United States for human consumption. I don't know if you knew that. Look it up if you don't believe me. But it was detected in 2 of the samples, and other types of meat were in the others. Here's the beauty for food fraud, is that beef and horse flesh taste pretty much the same. Next slide. Well, we have established historical data to show in the United Kingdom and Europe that it was a very common practice to integrate or contaminate or to fill beef products, primarily this type of combination product, fat and flesh, into a hamburger patty, ironically shown as a horse on the left, humorously and tragically mixed together to defraud the consumers of the United Kingdom or Britain. The European Union regulations state that the product must be traceable from the farm to the fork. What we're seeing here is DNA testing. It was used as a methodology to detect those frauds. And those companies were punished. Those grocery store chains, and the individuals, some of them were sent to jail. Next slide. Here's another fraud that the UK had. And I'm not saying it's not done here. My personal tastes are not for lamb or goat. But many people purchase lamb for consumption. We have a lot of people in the United States that love lamb, but we've recently found evidence, both in the UK and the United States, of people purchasing labeled lamb products. In reality, it was goat. Horrible, isn't it? And in the UK, you see stews of this variety. But here was the main issue, and I believe it is an issue for everyone who purchases flesh. It's called unaccredited foreign slaughterhouses mislabeling at the source, and then the buyer, either in the United States or other countries, just buying the packaged product and just handing it to the consumer through intermediaries, not checking. Goat meat was slaughtered abroad and then sealed, packaged, and labeled with fraudulent labels. Meat was falsely labeled as lamb, which had been slaughtered in the UK. No records whatsoever were kept, so it's kind of a concealment to demonstrate where that product was generated and what was in it. Next slide. Well, those UK, British vendors have now taken aggressive standards and steps to protect the customers to reveal. And you see that little graphic on the left with the classic European diagram with a red circle with a line across it? That represents that horse meat was not included in any of those products. That may be refreshing to many. On the right-hand side is a disclosure, a little more textual based. It said what we found and what we're doing. That is a responsible vendor. They're taking responsibility for what they found that was trespassed to them, and they sold it unwittingly. So they were victims as well. So the only thing we can do to find out is a DNA test. We can screen it, and then we can determine what percentage of what. Only the government can do that. It's a very complicated test. You will never have a DNA test in your home to do it. Guess what? Birdseye, which is an international company, sold chili con carne, which I call it chili beans, in Britain, which was found to have horse meat in it. Now, a canned product, which is much more difficult with a lot of heavily spiced and other ingredients to determine that, has to be a chemical test. Meat products that did have that were recalled, and that actually damaged their economy. It's a very complex food structure in packaged products. Next slide. Well, DNA testing, what does it do? It takes that primer and probe set of that meat and identifies it on chemical constituents of ATCG in a very complex pattern, and it can tell you yes or no what it is. It's complex in the sense that not everybody in the world can do it, very few laboratories can do it, but the bottom line, it will tell the truth of what that flesh is. On the right-hand side, you'll see a picture, and this is a common misconception of Kentucky Fried Chicken or many chicken places, that meat has been substituted either with rat meat or some other type of mammal. Here's the challenge. That particular case was proven with DNA to be actual chicken meat and not rat meat, so that case failed. Food fraud can be in the claiming of either it being falsely claimed, and in fact it's true, or it was consistent the whole time. So that's what we need to do. We only want the truth when it comes to food. Next slide. What is the challenge? The challenge is for food producers to step up their game. I call it upgraded food quality screening. They need to stop intentionally mixing lower cost flesh products with higher cost and then representing it as a higher cost product. That's something they intentionally need to stop doing, food fraud. What they need to start doing is requiring, on their end, DNA testing. And grocery stores need to validate that with their own DNA testing. So as the graphic on the right shows, are walking through making your consumer buying decisions, I implore you to look for products buy products that are labeled as either DNA tested, or you are going to organizations which are conscientious and buying from vendors which are also conscientious. They're not fraudulent, they're not deceitful, they're not offering deception, but they're giving you the truth in that food purchase. Next slide. What are my suggestions? Easy. You don't need to learn DNA testing. It's a very complex process, very expensive, but what you need to do is to find vendors that are honest, fair, and do not buy adulterated, contaminated, misrepresented products, illegal products, which offer you a health risk. It's difficult to determine, even for a mom and pop meat shop, the actual species, to do a speciation on that product. But you will find people that are honest and fair. Purchase those products from reputable, honest vendors. Do your homework. If you ever find a product that's not labeled properly, take the appropriate legal action to make that vendor change. Thank you very much.